I'm opening Java document. We'll continue. Mm, Let me open this. Yeah, we just started simple topic yesterday. I think in the first session, most of you are aware. It's about static concept. Okay. Yeah, I think I was talking about this in the last session. How to declare variables in a class and how to access them. This is what we had discussed maybe on Friday. Uh, Anyhow, Monday we don't have a session. Yesterday we had discussed about methods. So this is the one we discussed. Actually, method is simply speaking, it's a subprogram which has group of statements as a unit. That is method. And usually it is divided, it is used to break down a large program into small parts. And this is called modularization. And it helps for code reusability and then readability. It also increases readability and also optimizes code. So I'm just giving you a quick recap. You have a detailed explanation in the recorded session yesterday. Please go through that. Actually, we have two types of methods, default and parameters. Default means what? A method without parameters. Like if you see here, this is the syntax access modifier return type method name. In this parenthesis, you don't see any variables here. In this inside this, this is default method. An example is this, something like public void sum. This is method name, this is return type, and this is access modifier. If return type is void means this method doesn't return any value. Okay, if it is some other type like int or float or double or anything, means it is returning that specific type. I'll show you an example today about return type. Okay, this is how we define default methods. Okay, then once you declare a method in any OOP, we should call that outside the class. So for that we use reference dot method name. You can see here this one. Okay, reference dot method name. This is a call to default method because if you can see the parenthesis doesn't have any parameters. Okay, for example, if it is a sum method, we call s dot sum, something like this. No problem. I think there is a detailed discussion. You can go through that. This is a simple example about default methods. You can see here. So you took a class triangle and defined an area method. This is an void type, doesn't return any value, and access modifier is public means this method is accessible anywhere. And you declare a couple of, if you want to find area of a triangle, what do we need? We need a base and we need height and we need some resultant variable, some to store that result and logic, and then we print that result. And we have defined all these statements inside a method. If you see here, default method. Once we declare a simple method inside triangle class, then what did we do? We go to test class. Step 2, right? Once we define a class, then we should create an object. That's what we are doing here. We create an object and then we are calling this method on this reference because that is how we do in OOP. Invoke member of a class using reference. Here we should call method, that is area. So this is about default. Similarly, parameterized means a method with parameters. If you see here in this parenthesis, you have some variables. And this is example of parameterized method. You can see access modifier, return type, method name, and then we want to find sum of two numbers. So we declare two parameters, x and y, int x and int y. In these brackets, if you declare variables, these are parameters. Got it, friends? Or these are local variables otherwise. And we using these local variables, you do some logic here. And how do you call this parameterized method? Again, reference dot method name. While calling this parameterized method, you have to pass values. So values should be of what type? What are the variables you declare here? These values should be of that type. If these are int, then pass int values. If these are double, pass double values. If these are float, pass float values. Another important point is it's not like you should declare two variables. The number of variables depends on your necessity in the method. Okay, it can be two, it can be three, it can be four, how many ever you want. Okay, excuse me. So that's about this. And depends on this number of parameters, you should pass those many values from the call, method call. This is a method call. So that's an idea. This is a quick example. To find sum of two numbers, we declared two variables and then we just did sum using those variables and then printed that. And here if you see, we are doing step two. Once we define this, we are creating object and calling the method. If you see here, we are passing two parameters, A and B. To this method sum, A will be first parameter is passed to first argument, second parameter is passed to second argument. And then internally, you might assign to some variables we define in the class, or you can use them directly in the method. It's up to, it depends on the program necessity. Okay. So this is a quick idea. And a few important things which we didn't discuss yesterday is here, if you see, in the when we talk about parameters, here we are declaring two parameters in the sum method, x and y. Okay. And these are called formal or dummy parameters or local otherwise. We can also call them local. Okay. Here, what are the parameters you declare with method are formal or dummy or local. Remember, I'll talk more about it later. Okay. Next one. That's all. Anyhow, we had discussed other part clearly. Then, so we are switching to the next topic. Okay, are you seeing my screen and are you able to hear me right? Before I continue, can you please confirm? Are you able to see me? Okay, thanks for that. Now, this is what till this we had discussed yesterday. This is an example of what we did. A small difference is we use this method to initialize these variables ABC. Another important thing is today have a clear idea about this class concept because you should understand how to declare methods and how to create object and how to call these methods. And this is what we do with Selenium. We create all these WebDriver objects and multiple objects related to Selenium, and then we try to call methods on top of these objects. And it is so simple actually. See, this automation with Selenium is not that difficult. And also, because once you are familiar to automate one website, the automation process for any website is almost similar. So it's like more of doing a routine activity. I don't say if you are asking, I want some challenging means yes, you can do different ways of automation there. And when you are in testing, as many people has an opinion like what is that? It also has maybe people think that the scope here is less, but I don't think so. It also has it has there are many ways actually. There is a deep scope even in testing. Suppose this, especially when you come to the automation, you can do automation for different things actually. Apart from that, you can also come up with innovation. These days, there is a new word introduced in many companies. That is what we call innovation. Then you can apply all that. And simple point here is what to do all this. First, you should have these things clear. So what we discuss now. I hope this is clear for all of you. So what did yesterday is declared three variables, and that two are input. So we declare two parameters and initialize these two A and B here if you see. And then we used one more method to what did we do now? One method to print the to implement logic, one method to display the result, and then print it. And here, that's what we did in the yesterday's session. Okay. Anyhow, while doing, I'll just quickly recover. I mean, recap the examples one more time so that all of you get a clear picture. So now, yeah, thanks for confirming. So this is till this we discussed yesterday. Maybe if you want to have a little detailed discussion, you can stay back for a while today. I'll talk if anybody missed it yesterday. Okay, that is fine. Now the next topic which I would like to talk today is return type because we had discussed about default methods, parameterized methods. Now let's talk about return type. Default methods means method without parameters. Parameterized methods means method with parameters. Maybe if you ask me which is most used method in a real code, obviously we use much of parameterized methods. Of course, we use default as well, but the usage of parameter is much more in real time. Got it right? So let's talk about return type now. What is return type? This is another important thing in these traditional languages like C, CPP, C, Java, and C Sharp. Suppose if you go to Python, Python has return type, but you don't have that. You don't need to mention return type in Python like this. How we do in Java. Okay, but we'll talk it there. Here, what is return type? Return type, as name says, the meaning of return type means return something. It specifies what value a method should return, the type of value a method is returning. Okay. And here, if you see data type before method is a return type. Suppose if you see here, this data type before this method is a return type. Okay. And this data type before this method is a return type. Okay. So that is a return type. Data type before method is a return type. Okay. That's the simple idea. Return type is that. Now, next one, how to return a value. That is so simple. What is that? We can return a value from a method using the keyword return itself. For example, syntax look like this. Return space value. This syntax is same in all languages, including scripting languages as well. These are all non-scripting, right? Compiled languages. So this concept is same. Return space value is the way how we return a value. Okay, for example, or return space variable name. Either you can pass a value directly, return a value directly, or return variable. But most of the time, this syntax 2 is much more useful than this one. So many times we return variables than values. This is a quick idea. Got it, friends? So this is what we call return type. Return type means it specifies how to return a value. Okay, and the syntax and how do you return means we use for a return keyword, and then the syntax look like this: return space value or return space variable. Return type means what? This is how to return a value. Return type means the variable or the keyword which you declared before return. Even this void is a return type to main. Now, what is this difference between void and non-void? If you put void in before any method, means those methods don't return any value. They don't return any value. If you put something like this, if you see here, this method for this method we can return some values. Suppose instead of void, if you put int here, let me just show you. I'll write a detailed program. No need to confuse, but just giving a quick idea. When I say int, this time this method must return an integer value. You cannot just leave this like this. So what should I do now here in this if instead of printer? I should say return some sum. Excuse me, friends. Okay. So I believe this should be your, yeah, that's perfect. This will give you the, that, this thing. Similarly, here also you should say a return sum. Excuse me, friends. Something like this. So this is don't worry about the logic. You don't need to care about anything here. Don't care about anything here except this written concept and this written keyword. So this is return type. You put it here, that is return type means you are specifying to the compiler that you are returning an integer value from this method. So what did you do now? You are returning that integer. And you can see here, you see a return statement here, return space sum. So this is the correlation. When your return type is not a void and some data type here, then from that method, you should return a value by using return keyword like this and then that variable name or constant. Anyhow, we'll see a small example. So we don't need to get confused here. I'm just giving a quick idea. That's all about return. I hope this is clear, friends. That's all. Let's get to the topic. A small example now. But before I switch to that example, all of you are clear with this. What is return type and what is written here? Return type specifies the type of value method is returning, right? And how to return a value by using return keyword. And then this is the syntax. Now you should be familiar. Let's do a small example now. So in this program, we'll continue with the same one. Let's use this. Let's rewrite. We just declare a sum program now, sum class, sorry. In this, we declare three instance variables. These are called instance variables. So let me name it as instance. Maybe if you have questions, I will clarify it. I'll talk about all this. Today, probably I'll try to explain all that. Why instance means any variable declared inside a class, outside method, and a non-static. Suppose if you don't see this keyword static before, sorry, before any of these before these variables inside class. If you put static before this data type, this is a static variable. I'll talk about them as well. But this is static. But here these are non-static, what we call. Do you see static before these B and C? No. Then these are non-static. So point is simple. If you say what is instance means, variables declared, what shall we say? Inside class. I'm writing here itself in a comment. And outside method. Outside method. Of course, it has to be, that should be inside class only. And in Java, you cannot declare anything outside a class. Everything has to be inside a class. So anything inside class and outside method and non-static. Non-static, you can see here. Static is a different thing. We'll talk about it. I hope this is clear, friends. These are instance variables. Okay, then now these methods also called instance methods. I'll talk about them that as well. So all these methods are instance methods, what we call. Okay, remember, just remember all this. These are instance methods or non-static methods. In a class in Java, you can have two types of methods. One is non-static, no, this is non-static or instance methods. And the second one is static methods. But now we are not talking about static, but these are all instance methods or non-static methods. And only these types can exist inside a class, either instance methods or static methods. Maybe sometimes you can, so if you are familiar with Java, how we can have abstract methods, right? Even abstract can be instance or non-instance, that's all. Okay. So we'll talk about that when we go to abstract concept. But I don't think we can have abstract static methods. Even they are also instance methods only. Got it right? So anyhow, I don't want to confuse you with more more details at this stage. But remember, what are these? These are instance variables. What are these? These are instance methods. Maybe if you ask me why we are saying like this, simple. Here, all this, these variables, either these methods. If you want to access it outside this class, then we can do that only by creating object for these members. For these members. If you want to call these variables or if you want to call these methods, that is possible only after creating object. Only after creating object. This is called instance. Okay. What is an instance? Instance means object of a class. Right. So these members or these methods are accessible only through this object. So that's why these both variables and methods are part of this object, belong to this object. And the other name of object is instance. Variables part of instance are instance variables. Methods part of object are instance methods. Simply speaking, non-static variables inside a class and a non-static method inside a class are instance members. And they are part of object. A blind tip for you is you can't access these members without creating object. Why? If you ask me a question, again you might have a doubt. Why it is so? Means the answer is simple, friends. Without when you create object, memory is allocated for these variables first. And also for this method somewhere in some method area in your RAM. These are inside object. Variables usually, these instance variables always exist inside object. Remember, these exist where, friends? These exist inside object and these exist in method area. They are split when you execute program. So when you try to run program, what your JVM will do is it will split your program and put variables into some location, methods into some location. Execution happens in some other location. That's called stack. Execution happens in stack. Your code resides in method area. Your variables go and sit inside object. Understood? So as these variables are storing inside object, these are instance variables. And as you are able to invoke these methods only on object, these are instance methods, a blind tip. Okay, if it is static members, you don't need object. Remember, but here this object is needed and memory for these variables are allocated only when this object is created. And then this memory is allocated even for this methods only after creating object. So in both cases, memory is allocated for these members only after object is created. But here in this, if you see, this new operator allocates memory for this variables and methods. These are all important things, so I'm discussing here. I know our topic is written type. Before I jump to that, I'm giving a clear picture about why these are instance, why these are instance variables, instance methods. I'm talking about it. Okay. A blind tip is anything which you call on reference of class or instance members. Simply speaking. Instance members means they belong to object, they are part of object and they are work on object and they will work on object. These are instance members. Is this clear? Remember these words. If you go and search in any website, any textbook you read, right, or any YouTube you watch, they bring in these terminologies. You can keep hearing this. So that's why I'm trying to give you, add this technicalities. These are technical terms you need to use in a real programming as well as anything will anywhere. If you read any books or anything, these are very important terminologies. So I hope this is clear. I'll talk more about it. Now going switching back to the written type. Now I want to, this is my class. I have two instance variables which I should initialize. So I took a method. For this, void is enough. If you are initializing, you don't return type can be void. This method doesn't need to return anything. So I took two variables, x and y, local variables, and I initialized a to x and b to y. Sorry, opposite. I initialize x to a and y to b. Right? Simple initialization. Then after that, this time I am removing this display method. What I am doing is I am doing addition. And then I am not printing that in the class itself, but I am returning that. What I am doing is I am saying int now. Earlier, what did I do? I say int, sorry, void. Void doesn't need to return any value. But this time I don't want to print, but I want to return. I want this method to return this value, C, this resultant variable to the caller. Caller means what? To the main. So, so what shall I do now? I have changed my return type to int here. Right? So after this, what should I do? You can see an error here immediately. You can see this method must return a result of type int. Why? Once you change your return type to some other data type instead of void, then it expects you to return a value. So how to do that? Use return keyword, return space C. So when you declare your return type as non-void or any other data type other than void, then you must and should add this return statement in your code. Always recommended to keep this return as the last statement in the method. Maybe you can ask me a question, why? Then why? Because when you say return, your control will immediately return from your method and it doesn't go to the next statement after that. Suppose if you declare a statement like this, if you see here, and out of your this thing, maybe you are not familiar, you do this, the end, something like this. See, when I declare a statement of return, your Eclipse itself is showing you an error saying that read this error, please. What is that? Unreachable code. What is unreachable? Once you say return, and there is no point of executing statements after return. There is no chance of executing statements after return statement. You got it? These are all very important observations. Okay. So that's why even if you declare any statements after return, they are useless. That's why we call it as unreachable code. Is this clear, friends? I hope this is clear for all of you. So there is no use of these statements after return. Why? Once you say return, immediately from here, the control is returned back to the caller. Who is this? Main is calling this add. You can see here, add is inside main. The control is written back from wherever the call is. This method is called. This method call came from main. Again, control is written back to main. That's all. Got it, friends? Very. There are many observations if you just focus, observe carefully. One, this process is initializing instance variables. Of course, this is. I don't say this is 100% professional way. You can see here your local variables are x and y, your instance variables are a and b. Both are different, but in a real environment, here local will be same like this, int a, int b. And your instance also will be same. Both names of local instance variables and local variables are same. This is how you should write a standard code. Then you might ask me a question. Then how do I know which is local, which is instance? There is a confusion, right? Like if you are a new learner, you have this doubt now. Now, when I say A equal to A, I have a quick question. Keep observing, friends. Now, if we are very new, you don't know which is the local, which are local, which are instance. You might think left side are instance and right side are local. But what guarantee is there? Still, there is a confusion, right? That is why the standard practice when you declare variables, instance variables as like this. What is that? Like instance variables and local variables same or parameters same. Then in that case, the standard way of differentiating instance variable from local variables. Locals means these are temporary or dummy variables. But which are actual variables which belongs to the class A and B. And this A, this B are actual members or instance members. So this A, this B, if I ask a precise question, which are instance means this A Manoram, this B Manoram are instance, you might say. Then this, that is where we should apply this here. So what is that you should do here to differentiate instance variables from this parameters? We should apply what? That this only. There is a keyword called this in Java. This dot A you apply with the instance. This dot B apply with the instance. Now you can tell this is a standard way of writing a code in Java programming. So what is that you should do? Generally, when you write code, what is that you should do? First thing, when you declare instance variables, your instance variables and local variables should have same naming standard. Point one. Point two. When you initialize these parameters to these instance variables, how do you differentiate if they are same? Then we should apply this keyword with a dot. So this, whenever you see some variable with this means they are instance members. Excuse me, friends. Even this is applied with the method also, instance methods. But anyhow, we'll talk about it later. Now, I think this should be clear. This is actually the standard we follow in coding. You can go and check any website or any this thing textbooks. They always try to write a code like this because this is a standard practice people follow. Right? Next one. So, and then after that, and here, of course, we are good. We are just trying to print A and B, and we are not printing C, just returning it. If you want, you can print here, no issues. But for me, I want this result to be captured. I want this result somewhere to be preserved. Okay, I want to capture the result. So that's why what I do, I am returning this C. I'm not, even though I print here, still I want to return this and store it in some variable. So that's why what did I do? I applied a return type int here. And in real programming, in majority of the scenarios, if you do any logic, if you apply any logic, then such methods must and will return values. They should return values. They have to return values. That is why we apply a logic because these methods are not one-time use. See, at our learning, this thing, learning stage, we might print and see the output and we might be happy with that. But in a real environment, it's not about a method, printing, and it's not for one-time purpose. Once you define method, you call this, where you need this some logic, and you pass some parameters to that, and then apply logic, and then what do you do, friends? And get that result somewhere. And wherever you need this logic, you just call that method and it returns that result. That result can be used somewhere in the further processing. So that's how these methods with logic are very useful. Methods implementing logic will return some results. Okay, I think this should be clear for all of you. We'll simplify this to my next level, much more simplified way. Instead of two methods, we'll just simplify to one method after this. No problem. Okay, this is a quick idea about what, friends, about return type, about instance variables, about local variables, and then the differentiation part, and then how to declare return type. What if return type is non is a mint? How and how to return a value from a method? All these things we discussed now. Now we are not yet completed. Now at the in the main method. Now if you go to the test class, some test, this display is not needed. Why? Do you have any method declared display in the class? No, we don't have that. Then there is no meaning in calling this display. So is there any meaning in that? Without a method, if you make a call means it's like calling a person that doesn't exist. So remove it, not needed. Point two. This method is returning result. If you see here, it is returning result. When a method return result, here this is the caller to that add. This is the method call. When this is the method call, and if the method is returning, our as a developer, our responsibility is to assign this result to some variable. Suppose this is, we know that this returns some results and then declare some variable, some int result equal to. So this should happen. This assignment should happen. A method call should be assigned to some variable only when this method is returning a result. If it is returning a result, then only you should do this assignment. Suppose, assume that this is void and there is no returning here. See, and still if you assign this method call to a variable, if you do this assignment, then it leads to error. You can see here it's showing an error. Read that error. Type mismatch. Cannot convert from void to int. Why? Because if your method is void, it doesn't return value. And when your method don't return value, then there is no meaning in assigning that method to a local variable or any other variable. There is no meaning to assign this method call to a variable here like this. Why? This has to happen only if this method return a value. Else don't do that. Now, in this case, okay, is this valid or invalid? Assigning this method call to this result, do you think this is valid or invalid, friends? Can you answer in the comments? Can you please share your comments in the chat box? Is this valid or invalid? Please share your answer in the chat box. Is this valid or invalid? Okay, this is invalid. Why it's invalid? Because this is a void method. Void method don't return a value. And if you assign a method call to a result when it is void, then there is no meaning, right? Because when a method don't return a value, assigning it to a variable is useless. That's why you have an error here. You can see here. So this is invalid scenario. You got it right, friends. What is this? This is a invalid scenario. So how to correct this now? Change this return type. Change this to int. And here you should add a return statement inside method. Now this is a valid scenario. Why this method return a value? So you are initially assigning it to a local variable here in main. Now you print this system.out.println. Here the sum is, you can just simply say plus result. And then what do you do? Run it. And you can see the sum is 3 here. We are printing A and B in the add method, and we are printing C from the main. So that C, whatever the value of C is returned, and that is assigned to result variable. And when you print that result, that is printed. That's what happens here. Is this clear for all of you, friends? This is a quick idea about the concept of return type. So what is return type? Return type tells about type of value, a method. This is a method which is returning. Here, before this method, if you put int means from that method, you are returning an integer value. See here, if you see, if you observe C, what is the data type of C here? If you see, the data type of C is int. Mean that is why you put int before method add. Simply speaking, suppose if the data type of int is double or float, suppose let me put it as float. And here, this is C is what type now? Float type. But what is the return type here? Int. Immediately you can see an error here. Put your cursor on this. You can see an error. Type mismatch cannot convert float to int. Remember this in Java, in this kind of traditional languages, float is treated as a higher level data type than int because float has precision, int don't have precision. That way, these are not convertible types automatically. Of course, we can do it with the explicit conversion. That's why you can see an error here. Then what is the correction here? Change this return type from int to float. Now you can see error is gone like that. Why? If you are returning a float value from this method, then the return type has to be float or its convertible type. Okay, float or convertible type, this can be double, no problem. Float can be converted to double, no issues. But float cannot be double to int, converted to int or long or byte or short. So now if you can see error is gone. Now you are returning a float, your return type is float. Means return type by looking at this method, now what you understand, return type specifies type of value you are returning from a method. Looking at this method, float add means add method is returning float value. Suppose before this method, if you have int add means int method is returning int value. Suppose it is you put void here. By looking at method itself, you understand this method should not return any value. Of course, this is not legal. When I put void, immediately you can see error here. Put your cursor there and read it. Void methods cannot return a value as if something like, like somebody cannot do something. Is this clear for all of you friends? This is a quick idea about return type and returning thing. Got it? So finally, what is the conclusion now? What should I do now? Change this to float or int. It's up to you. Int should be fine in this scenario. And of course, you can modify this to int back. Just for doing some analysis, we have just made some changes and observed how it works when you make these changes. Now you should be clear with the return type. Return type is a data type before a method which tells what value you are returning from a method. And how to return it from a method means using this return keyword. And once you return a value from a method, what should you do in the caller? In the calling method, you should initialize that method call to some variable so that that result is assigned to that variable. And this result can be used in further processing. Here we are printing and seeing it. But in a real programming, this value, whatever we got returned, the value which is assigned here, returned from this method will be used in further processing. This is a quick idea about return type. Understood now? And here we are using a default method. You can change this to parameter. Suppose leave about this whole thing. Are you good till this, friends? Before I talk about go to switch to the next scenario, you can see this is how we should work with classes and objects. This is actually a full-fledged simple class program. You should define a class like this for anything you do. You should have instance variables. You should have a specific method, a separate method to initialize variables, separate method for logic, separate method for printing if needed. Okay, it depends on your need and necessity like this. Okay, then you should break down this into a test class, create object. This is important part. call these methods. If see, I have input method and I have add method, I'm calling them like this on reference of this class. Provided if these are instance methods. Is this clear for all of you? So this is how you should build a class, because tomorrow when we start working with Selenium, maybe in couple of sessions, right? This is how we do. We don't create classes because most of the time Selenium provides built-in APIs for us. We just use those built-in classes and create object like this. Our part starts from here only, directly here. You don't need to do all these steps. Classes are already built in for your Selenium. So the thing is, you should understand how to create objects like this, how to call methods which were present in those classes. Suppose you are working on some window, you call all window methods which belongs to that website, like to call checkbox or to call radio button, all that. Is that clear now? This is a quick idea, friends. Okay, next one. So clear now? Right. I hope you are clear about all that. So this is actually a different scenario. These days, I think I doubt people are still asking this questions, because earlier I used to see these questions in interviews. You can save a Java program with any name and compile the program with that name we saved. But while executing program, we must run the program with the class that is having main method inside it. I'll talk about this also. Maybe these are all useful tips of, these are good tips, okay, for programming. Okay, friends, let's switch to the next topic. So now you are good with all this stuff. What are all that stuff? One, you know how to declare a class. Two, how to declare variables and methods. Three, how to create an object. Four, how to access members of a class. Okay, of a class. Five, you also know, you have a clear idea about return type, right? So this itself, this is very important. Understanding all this is important. Remaining all are built on top of all these things. Okay, so that's about this one. Now let's switch to the, what is that? Switch to the next topic. What is that? So there are a few more scenarios actually. Let me quickly give you a quick idea about these things. Let's have a quick idea. Very useful things here. You can see here now, execution process of Java program. So this is from Notepad, whatever I am showing here. For now, we don't need Notepad. You can skip it. But if you are really curious, I'll show one program, how to write a program in Notepad, how to compile it and how to execute it from command prompt. I can show you that, no issues. But now, what is the execution process after seeing this program, sir? What is that, friends, sir? So following, right? This is important. So here in this Eclipse, you see here, this is our test class. Always execution of your program begins from main method. If you want, you can put a debugger and see that, no issues. So if you put a debugger and run this program in debug mode, you can understand a clear flow of this program. Let me just run it so that you can see it. See here, run. Now you are executing this program in debug mode. Now your program execution started from where, if you see here, it starts with main. How do I know it starts with main? See here in this left window, this one, if you see here, this class is calling main, some test dot main. At line 31, if you see here, this is the starting point of executing a program. And when this is executed, you can see all that variables that are created inside your memory. This args, this variable get created in memory now. These are all temporary variables, right? Then it started creating object. Now let's run one step after this. You can see here, yeah, step into is not needed. You call this step into only when you are trying to debug a method, not the normal statement. So now we don't have a method. This is a simple object. So what should you say? Step over. Press F6. When I say press F6, you have gone to line 32 from 31. Meanwhile, what happened? An object is created for sum here. If you see here, this is sum object. Observe these things. These are quite interesting. Observe these things, friends. You don't find it in many of these sessions in YouTube channels or websites quickly. So most of the websites talk about it, but not in most understandable thing. Now, when I create object, observe this. See here, this beautiness here. This S is under this S. If you can see, three variables are present, means are created. Your instance variables are created under this object. Once this object got executed, immediately after that, you can see this reference is added here with your object ID, which is some 27 internally. And at the same time, you can see three variables are created and those three variables are set to zeros here. If you observe carefully, these are default values. Why? If it is integer, they are by default set to defaults once they are created. Now what happens? So when some object is created, inside some object, these three variables are created. And these are created inside some object ABC and they are set to 0 here, defaults. I'll talk about that also, but I'm just giving a clear picture about the execution flow. So what happened once I create an object, memory is allocated for that class and for that instance variables, and these variables exist inside object. That's why we call them as instance variables, and they are set to default values 0 here. Understood now? Excuse me, friends. So that's about it. Next, after that, you move to line 32 here. That is calling input data. Now, question to all of you. Maybe you can answer it in the chat box, friends. You can comment in the chat box. Is this a method call or a normal statement? Is it normal statements or a method call? Now, like normal statement is seeing some doing some addition or just printing like that. This is method call or normal statement? Method call, right? Then you should step into this. If it is a method call, you should go to that method and get into that method. That is what we call, you can see here. When you are tracing, you should be very clear. When should we apply step over? When should we apply step into? Now you should get into this method call. So click on this step into. Now immediately from input this method call, this is the call. Your control jumped from 32nd line to which line? 12th line first. After that, it came to 13th. Means what? It stepped into this input data method. Your control, you can see whenever you have a method call, the control is jumped from that call to that actual method. Now which statement, which control I should choose now? Is it step over or step into? Here there is no for this one. These are just simple initializations at line 13 and line 14. Just say step over. Now even you can say step over. Execution is completed. And also observe carefully right side window. When this line 13 is executed, now A is set to 1. You can see here when this you observe carefully here, friends. And it's showing this means this belongs to object, this A and B. Earlier A is set to 0, B is set to 0, C is set to 0. But while this method is executing, parallelly you can see at the right side window, this A is now modified to 1. Why? Because this statement initializes that values you are passing from here. 1 is assigned to first argument. 2 is assigned copied to second argument. Now that A is copied to which one? This instance variable A. That's why this got modified to 1. This B is assigned to B. Then this got modified to 2. Are you observing this? This is very interesting. Now after that, what do you do? Step over. Step over means execution of method is completed. Control again come back to this calling method. This is calling method and this is method call. Now step over. Now what is that? You are at the end of the execution. Now observe carefully. Again, if you say step over, what happened now? You can see here when I say step over, again control came back to main method. You can see this control is in 33rd line. 33rd is present in main. Now it has gone to another method. Now by the time this execution of this method happened, this method modified the values of A and B. Earlier in the beginning they were set to default values 0. But after this method is executed, input data set this instance variable to 1 and 2. You can see in the right side window. Following this, friends, after this, again, line 33. Is this a method call or a general statement? Method call. Then call step into. Okay, now again you have jump to add method. And now you don't see any of these values here now. If you see here, because now we are talking about what add. Inside add, what happens? This print happens. Step over now. Apply step over. Then what? That A is printed. Again, step over, B is printed. Now C. Now when this gets executed, now you will see in the right side window, C, the value of C gets modified now. Earlier C is set to 0. Now see here. Right? Step over. Now when you say step over, you can see now. Inside, this is the object structure. All these three variables exist inside object. And whenever these methods are doing some operation, these values inside these objects get affected. Because why? These methods are called on the reference of some, so the values of object keep more changing. Now when you say C equal to A plus B here, if you say C equal to A plus B, the value of C is set to 3 because this 1 and 2 is added and then that is assigned to C here. When this is assigned here, automatically the value in the object gets changed, updated to 3 here. And finally, step over. Now you are at where you can see here return C and then step. So finally what when you say return C, it got returned back immediately and then it got to main and then it has gone to 34th line. Now step over. Again what happened? Just this result get printed. You can see already it's printed. I did the step over, just some time back and then again step over. Now what happened? It has gone to the end of main. Means execution is going to finish. Step over. Execution completed. You can see that red button had gone now. Earlier this red button is it is in red color while executing. Once the execution is successfully done, you can see the statements terminated, completed. Very fine, friends. This is completed. Then execution stopped now. Once main execution completes, it returns the control back to JVM. That ends the execution of this program and it is terminated. Is this clear for all of you? This is a clear. Yeah. Anyhow, I'll give more clarity again. Tomorrow also I'll give one more execution flow so that everybody will have a clear picture. But today it should be understood and this is very useful session if I'm not wrong. So because if you start from Java and if you want to understand what's happening at each level, this is going to help you. And also it gives you a clear idea where to choose for what values, how the debugging happens, all that. Is this clear for all of you? Anyhow, if you have any questions or if you have any doubt or if you don't understand, still you can stay back. I'll help you to get a clear picture. That's all, friends, for today. This is the execution flow. I give, we just have only, okay, simple statement, but now we are able to get a more out of it by seeing the execution flow in a debugging method approach. So that's it, friends. We'll talk about more on this in next session. Tomorrow I'll give more clarity on this postmortem, and then we'll switch to the other topic, constructors, and then inheritance, and then polymorphism, all that. Okay. Okay, friends, we are done with here. Any questions? You can stay back, else we'll stop here.